how these things work.
This meeting is being recorded.
We'll have people dropping in and out as time permits. But I wanted to thank you for joining us this morning. We're especially interested in campaign finance this time around. It's always a thrilling subject, but especially nowadays. And I wanted to just bring you in. If you look at Peter's LinkedIn, he describes himself as an itinerant journalist currently, but he did spend nearly 25 years, we'll round it up to 25 years at NPR. I want to thank Acacia Squires, if Acacia could wave to the camera, for setting this up. Acacia is, if many of you know her because she's a guru at NPR for state political coverage, and you've probably worked with her. And we've just sort of started to get to know her, and she suggested this. And so we're really excited. So without further ado, Peter, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your work, your interest in this area, and anything else you'd like to share, and we'll have some robust conversation.
Okay. Well, I think I got interested in this because I'm a Watergate baby. I kind of entered the workforce right around the time that Watergate was cresting, and was trying to get into journalism. So it seemed like a natural fit. And I spent, I don't know, 12 years at daily papers, and then kind of found a path into what led me to NPR, the path of covering campaign finance stuff. I had a great time doing it. I really enjoyed it.
And we miss you sorely.
Oh, thank you.
And that's why you're here.
Okay.
So do you want to launch into some insights, Peter?
Well, what would help me would be if you all could give me a sense of things that are of interest to you, or how you think getting deeper into campaign finance would be useful to you.
Well, I know I have some things, but I'll put it out to the group first to see if there's anyone else who would like to get started. All right, that's my cue. I'm really interested in, perhaps the term I want to use is unexpected or unusual involvement in funding and support for campaigns. We've seen Democrats funding Republicans in order to get a different Republican off the radar. We've seen some really interesting things about about creative ways of kind of getting certain candidates out of the conversation. I'm interested in that stream of funding, and where we can be looking for some interesting ideas there.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that before, by the way. The thing that I got increasingly interested in as I went along was the attempts to people at the national level to get to have influence at the state level. When senators raise money, a lot of it comes from out of state, just because the state doesn't have a big enough fundraising base to support a Senate campaign. So, that's kind of a benign way of looking at that part of it. But there is much more of a national vision by the parties, especially the Republicans, in sort of what do the national people think they need at the level of Wisconsin or Iowa, or like that. So that's been kind of a growth area, and is continuing to be the Dems strategy. I think it's kind of stupid, but it has gotten a lot of attention, so maybe that's good for them.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that, Peter, after Peter and I had like a little bit of a background call on Monday just to discuss some things. And then we had the Maryland primary last night. And, you know, the DGA, the Democratic Governors Association, was upset with our coverage because we, you know, just talked about basically their strategy to, you know, shove a bunch of money over to Dan Cox, who's the Trump-backed Republican. You know, he's in the House of Delegates there, very conservative. And in order to keep Kelly Schultz, who's, you know, a little bit more moderate, backed by the moderate Republican governor there in Maryland, from winning, so that they, you know, thought they could have an easier strategy, or sorry, an easier general election in November. But then, Peter, after listening to the stories that you sent us, part 1 and 2, that you did with the Centers for Public Integrity, I was thinking, wow, like, this stuff is going on all the time. And at least the DGA put their name on those ads. You know, they do say paid for DGA action at the end. And so what you said right now is really interesting, because it's like, yeah, they've gotten a lot of press on it. And I don't know, I mean, this is my 4th year doing this. So the last year I did this, or the first year I did this was 2018. So it was, you know, another big gubernatorial year. So I don't have a lot of points of comparison, but I really don't remember a lot of, you know, focus on them as a group in 2018. I probably had my head in the sand anyway, but
who as a group?
DGA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess maybe, like, what do you think about that? I mean, you know, their DGA action is their PAC. And so they, I guess, you know, in TV advertising have to disclose that. But so much of the work that you were doing at NPR was about money. We have no idea where it's coming from. I guess, I don't know, like, how do you, I don't know what my question is, but I guess I'm just thinking, like, you know, at least with the DGA, we know what's going on. Or I guess we don't know where the money necessarily is coming from all the time. But does that bring anything to mind that might be interesting to talk? Yeah.
Well, the Republican Governors Association has been kicking the DGA's ass for, I don't know, 15 or 20 years, I think. And I'm kind of surprised that that, as far as I know, they haven't, the RGA hasn't been heard from this cycle. They certainly don't have the high profile that the DGA has because of the DGA ads. But the Republican Governors Association was really effective over the years. And, you know, so the first question I had was, is the DGA strategy now something that's going to be as effective as the RGA has been all this time? Or is it just something to say, hey, we're the DGA, look at us? Anyway, so.
But the other part of that, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I don't think that there's ever going to be disclosure of the DGA donors, because it's the DGA that is buying the ads. So, you know, that's obviously a kind of flawed structure. But
maybe could you go through the, you know, we talked about this a little bit on Monday, but the difference between like individuals, PACs, super PACs, social welfare organizations, just as sort of a basis.
Yeah, let me get my list here. Yeah, it's, thank you. It's the, they're kind of concentric rings is the way I thought of it. You know, the ones closest to the actual campaigns, if you're talking about federal stuff, would be individual donors and political action committees because they can give money directly to candidates. And then outside of that, you have super PACs, which are one step farther away, and 501c4s, social welfare organizations, and then you get to like trade associations, which are giving money to which are giving money to the groups that are active. So, and then there are other groups that or entities that are out kind of in the outer ring, and this is the point where I confess that I haven't been keeping really close track the past few years, but the biggest impact you have as a donor is giving directly to the candidate, and then the further you get away, the more tenuous that connection is, but the amount you can throw into the pot is a lot larger, which is just a reflection of the insanity of the campaign finance system. But that's sort of the way I'm looking at it.
Peter,
Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Peter, thanks for being here. Appreciate this. Sure. I was wondering if you could suggest or offer some guidance about sophisticated ways generally to cover campaign finance. As a reader, I get irritated sometimes when I see stories that are just like lists of who raised what, who's sure. running against who and who raised how much. And I feel like that plays a little bit to the insiders who understand and can translate that stuff. But for the average person, aside from the sums of money, it doesn't mean that much. And the sums of money, I find, don't even always mean that much, because the person who gets the larger amount of money, it's not a rarity that they lose. And so I think sometimes it's cast as like a temperature taking or an indication of who's more popular. And it's maybe not always the case. But having said all that, do you have suggestions of, smart ways to contextualize the money in the origins and the sources and things like that, and maybe to go a little bit deeper in telling stories about campaign finance, just broadly?
Yeah, excuse me, the one that that I felt the most satisfying having developed that idea in some particular campaign, the in-state versus out-of-state donors. Excuse me a sec. The idea, especially that all federal candidates now are much more national in their fundraising base than they used to be, and that seems to be especially true with senators from small states. Again, the thing of there's only so much money available in the state. So, so I think that's worth pointing out, that the more important your senator gets to be, the more attenuated his connection to the people he's representing. And this also applies to House members, as they work their way up the committee ladders, for instance. So that's and then the broader question that's part of is you look at the donor list and say, why is this guy giving? What's the are there people that that sort of pop out as they seem to have an extraordinary interest in this campaign? So that's my half-baked answer right now. I've been away from it for 3 years. So.
I think
but
yeah, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Yeah.
And just as a follow-up to that,
yeah.
I realize that this question may be somewhat of an impossibility, but I've seen patterns of, I see a lot of patterns in terms of like efforts to unspool where dark money comes from. And I understand that because it's called dark money because the idea is you're not supposed to find out where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I've seen some people go to extraordinary lengths to conceal the identity of donors, even in some instances where regulators have said that they should be disclosed. And I'm curious if you've had luck in the past of ever unspooling the source of dark money. And if you've had some tricks or suggestions reporting wise about how to get at that.
Generally, no, I haven't had success. The story that Acacia and I were talking about is an example. There was a dark money group called Wellspring that, sorry, that is it's sort of a fundraising entity for I think for the religious right is a fair characterization. And so for this, I did the story that, Acacia, are you going to send it around, or did you send it around?
Yeah, I already did. I sent it around. Okay. I hope people got the chance to listen to it, but also look at your incredible graphic. I forget if it was page 1 or 2 with all the arrows pointing, how money gets to Wellspring or where money goes from Wellspring.
Yeah, well, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was working with Center for Responsive Politics, and the guy at Center for Responsive Politics who sort of developed the whole, an initial database for covering dark money. He's now at Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and if I can give you his name and email, and then you can talk to him about how he developed this, and he's happy to help people who are trying to cover dark money. So his name is Robert McGuire, Maguire, and his email is rmcguire@citizensforethics.org. And I told him I was going to be talking to you guys, and he said, the more the merrier. So there you are. Going back to my experience with Wellspring, the two people whose names were on the organizational papers for Wellspring, a husband and wife, she was I don't know. She was the more important one in this organization. He was like the treasurer, and they had done other things like this. So, I tracked them down, and then I tried to talk to them. I wound up, I was leaving a message. I was talking to them and say, yeah, well, we'll set up an interview later, and they never did. I finally went to their house, wound up talking to their daughter, left my card, all that. I get a phone call from Cleta Mitchell, who's now more famous as a Trumpster than she was as a campaign finance lawyer. But anyway, she represented them. She called me up and started yelling at me for harassing them. And I was sort of like, you expected me to put this story on the air without really trying hard to get their side of it, and she backed down. But anyway, it was not a successful thing, to get inside the Wellspring organization. I had the documents, the IRS 990s and a few other things that, I think that Robert McGuire had given me. I forget if he gave me all of them or if I got some of them other ways. But, I had solid information on them. I didn't have their side of the story at all, which is really frustrating to me. And that's kind of been my experience with them, with C4s, with super PACs, all these groups, they file the paper that they have to, and beyond that, they, in my experience, rarely have anything to say to someone like me.
In the second part of that story, I think you mentioned something about, the IRS. And of course, I don't think things have gotten better for the IRS since 2013, but, the IRS was trying to staff up for, better oversight of this kind of thing. Since 2013, I guess it's been 9 years. Do you think there's been any change there?
I don't know. I haven't been involved in any of that stuff since then. So I don't see a lot of coverage of it, which I think means reporters have moved on rather than reporters are getting piles of IRS documents and are completely satisfied.
Hey, Peter, thanks for doing this. Kind of a general question overview. When I think about your reporting on NPR, I think of the beat that you kind of carved out and was crucial to a lot of understanding of politics during your tenure there. A lot of smaller stations, smaller networks, people are wearing a lot of hats, stretched thin. How do you suggest political reporters or people covering state government think as a campaign finance reporter, or put that hat on quickly when a lot of times we're thinking primarily about horse races or state of play? What kind of tricks do you have that you would suggest?
The main trick, I think, is to find someone at one of the organizations that tracks this stuff to help you, to do the legwork, basically, so that you can get the story without having to blow off all the other things you have to do.
So the trick is tricking someone to be your friend and help you.
Oh, no, they want to help you.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah, but yeah, in a perfect world, you'd be part of a team spending a lot of time on a story, and if you can't get the team within your organization, then the next best thing is to partner with someone who already knows the stuff and can guide you along. Yeah. So again, Robert McGuire, the Open Secrets folks, do that kind of thing, and there are probably other groups too. I'm not sure. I tended not to have relationships like that. It's the luxury of time at a big organization. But there are people that are happy to help. So.
And Open Secrets and Follow the Money merged to combine their powers as well.
Yeah, so you would go to the same place for stuff about federal elections or stuff about state elections.
Yeah, but I guess, and then one thing I'd suggested to the group is, one wild thing about my job is that, there are federal election laws and then states have all of their own election laws too. So I don't know, has anyone been able to poke around and see if there's anything significant about your state in that way? Like, I know it's not close to your region, but for instance, Oregon doesn't have any campaign contribution limits. So that's why we see, you know, Nike CEO giving $100 million or whatever. But again, at least that's not, you know, sheltered information, which I keep going back to, like, what's better, you know?
Yeah, Virginia is like that too.
Yeah.
One thing they did in Missouri, and it was under the guise of, you know, trying to clean up the ethics in state politics, or that was the idea, but it forbid, or it limited direct expenditures from companies to candidates. And what that ended up doing instead was leading to the proliferation of political action committees that are unconnected, that bundle all this money together and then make the expenditures to the candidates, which then makes it even harder to really know where the money is coming from, if that makes sense.
Is it like, from the corporate point of view, is it like they're turning their money over to an expert who will know what to do with it?
Yeah, or a like-minded, you know, a like-minded political operative who sets up the political action committee that then makes the expenditures on their behalf, presumably. I mean, and it also makes, I mean, it makes it so that the company can say, well, we just gave this money to this organization. They make the decisions on where to spend it. And so we can't be held accountable for who gets it and what they do with it.
Perfect. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, the whole business of corporate money, there are a few people who in Washington who sort of specialize in this. Let me root around, see if I can find them, because the corporate money is its own dark money. You know, it's very easy for them to say, oh, we didn't mean to do this. Actually, there's a guy, I forget his name. His website is Popular Information. I guess popularinformation.org.com. I get emails from him. You can sign up for an email thing. And one of his main things is looking at corporations that say, we're never going to give money to those kind of politicians again. We're swearing off. And then he looks a few months later and updates it to what they, thank you, yes. He looks at how quickly they fell off that wagon, basically. So I it's a small operation. He does a really good job. I think it's a useful thing.
Yeah, that might be interesting. And I'm just, having thoughts here, especially as we see, corporations like Disney, and of course that's one of the biggest ones, so it's easy to name them, and others, sort of weighing in on the LGBTQ conversations in states, or abortion or things like that. And sort of the old put their money where their mouth is kind of thing.
Yeah, they seize the chance to take a stand, and then they're hoping everybody kind of forgets that they did. Yeah, there's also a small nonprofit that in DC that tracks corporate disclosure of their political activity or their political spending, and I got to track down his name and the name of the organization. I can picture him. I'm drawing a complete blank on his name, so I will. I'll do that, and I will. Acacia, I'll send it to you, and you can send it around.
Okay, sounds good. Peter, sorry, go ahead, Holly.
Oh, I was just gonna remind people, you don't have to be shy if you have questions or comments or anything to share from the vantage point of your state. Please speak up.
I was maybe gonna ask just a question on behalf of the group. You know, if you're sort of starting at square one when it comes to, let's say you really want to, Nebraska's on the call, for instance, you really want to look at the gubernatorial race in Nebraska for November. Do you have any tips on just where to get started when it comes to that election and money? Just as a very basic example.
And the candidates that
the primaries
are yeah, okay. So the tickets are in place.
So yeah, one. Yeah. I think Will can correct me, but I think it's one Democrat, one Republican.
Yep. You got
okay.
It.
Yeah, I would start looking at the big industries in the state, and the companies that make up those industries. Get it down to the level of where are people actually writing checks, and see what the connections are between, what are the existing connections between the donors and the candidates. How are they trying to change those? Presumably, well, maybe not. I was going to say presumably trying to reach out to the other candidate as well, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're just writing the other side off. And also, I would look really hard for out-of-state money, especially money from DC. Because that then you're getting into groups that are giving money and may turn out to have no connection at all with Nebraska, no benefit to Alaska, to Nebraska residents for the money that's being spent to influence their votes.
One thing I'm really interested in, here in Missouri, we have a rather crowded primary field for U.S. Senate, and Donald Trump has not endorsed anyone yet, but has unendorsed at least one person, and said, don't vote for her. But I'm really interested in the calculus of, GOP donors, for example, who are looking at such a field, and, in a red state like we have, we're going to have most likely a U.S. senator who's Republican to replace the outgoing one. And I was just wondering a little bit of any insights you can share about what we could be looking for in the behavior of donors when you have a field like that, and such a crazy field. You've got Greitens in there, for heaven's sake,
Yeah, that's a showstopper by itself, it seems. Yeah, looking at it from a distance, that's the way it looks to me. Well, the national parties obviously are deeply interested in this, and so that presumably there's a lot of money being raised in DC for those folks. So, to the extent that you can document the candidates coming east here to to try to bring home some cash. I think that would be a useful thing to spotlight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to ask something, but I also don't want to step on anyone else. Go ahead. Steve, are you going to say something?
Yeah, Peter, could you indulge me? This is like a citizen of the world type question. But like, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen a couple of instances where people went to pretty extraordinary lengths to keep their identities obscured or obscured on behalf of someone else as donors to a particular political cause. One was two John Does who sued the Federal Election Commission to keep their identities hidden. And I think the DC circuit, and it was involving a Missouri political action committee and money that got kind of funneled through a couple different avenues to a political candidate. And the DC circuit ruled that their identity should be disclosed, and they appealed that all the way up to the circuit court. And I think it might even still be on appeal. But basically, and then Eric Greitens, when he resigned as governor of Missouri, it happened right after a judge ordered that some of his donors had to be disclosed. And his resignation forestalled that. And it makes me wonder, I mean, are the origins of this money, like, why do people go to the lengths that they do to obscure the origins of this money? Like, is it illegal money? Is it like, I mean, it almost strikes me as a big money laundering operation.
Yeah, I have never heard stories like that. You know, that people, you know, kind of do circuitous things in giving money, in my experience, but not that circuitous. Yeah. Well, there are more people, I think, on the fringes of donor world that are giving large amounts of money, and you know, like you know, they have Russian connections or something like that. So, you know, it may be sort of a growth industry in campaign finance. People guiding other people to maintain their anonymity.
I guess one thought I just had, and looking at the Illinois gubernatorial election, which I realize is not a state represented in this hub, and like the LA mayoral race, and then, you know, Donald Trump's presidency, like, is this the first time we're seeing billionaires or many multimillionaires funding their own campaigns to this extent? And do you have thoughts about that?
I'm having thoughts about it just now. I have before.
Yeah.
Yeah. You may be right that there's, well, if you go back in history and adjust for inflation, then maybe you can find the same thing in the Gilded Age. You know, when, you know, there are lots of millionaires in the Senate, and yeah, I mean, most of these people would rather someone else pay the bill, but why so many people are willing to fork over their own money now, you know, is a good question.
No personal or political opinions about J.B. Pritzker, but I just don't think he would have won that gubernatorial election if he hadn't given like $100 million to himself. I don't, but
yeah. And and the Supreme Court thinks that's fine. It's robust. It's a display of robust political speech.
I had another question, but I don't want to hog the conversation.
Oh, come on.
Well, I'll go ahead and hog it then. We've talked about like the donor and like the fundraising aspect of it, but I have a couple questions about like the other side of the ledger. So the campaigns themselves that receive the money and then what they spend it on. And one thing I get a lot of people trying to tip me off about or making suggestions on like places like social media and blogs is when campaigns spend money on law firms, there tends to be an assumption from their political adversaries that they are in some kind of trouble, that they're sending legal bills over to somebody to keep something hidden. And can you talk about generally what to look for on the expense side? I mean, I don't think that theory always necessarily holds true, that if you're sending money to a law firm that you're forestalling a problem. But on the expense side, like what are the kind of the top three things that are instructive to you when you're looking at a campaign finance report?
The advertising outlays, the different types of ads or of messaging is the first one. The spending reports don't show much about grassroots work. At least didn't in my experience. So that's it kind of skews the picture of what you've got. The legal bills. Well, they could be hiding all sorts of nefarious stuff, but we'll never know. And campaigns run up a lot of legal bills, just in the nature of ad compliance and things like that. So, and of course the big thing in campaign expenditures is personal spending. Duncan Hunter Jr. in California. He and his wife, you know about this.
Yes, he's actually my best friend from high school's cousin.
But okay.
Very distinct political lines there, yeah.
Yeah. So like he's a military man, son of a military man, and a military congressman in a military district, and it turns out he and his wife were spending money on vacations, on dental work, on just anything you can imagine, where you might be sitting at home writing your checks at the end of the month and saying, oh God, I wish I didn't have to pay this thing. Well, they didn't pay it. They sent it to the campaign. And then at the end, he and his wife tried to rat each other out, which was just kind of, the chef's kiss. So.
Didn't he get a pardon from Trump?
Probably, I don't know.
The two congressmen that misspent a ton of money in San Diego both got pardoned by Trump at the same time.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Duncan Hunter and Duke Cunningham, both from San Diego, both got pardoned at the same time for the same crime.
Yeah. Hunter was, to my mind, even more flamboyant than Cunningham was, but that's, getting into the dregs of it. But I'm glad they can live easy lives now.
No consequences.
Yeah.
One wonders what kind of expenditures maybe hidden in the depths of Trump documentation somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't have anything else to ask. I was just going to say I should probably hop off in just a minute. But I didn't want to leave the group unless, yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to answer more questions to the extent that I'm able to. Acacia, if you want to pass around my email, if anyone wants it.
Or maybe it's right there on your screen, Peter.
Oh,
PT,
I got
PTR Overby.
Okay. Acacia, never mind.
Well, Acacia, thank you for helping us get this going, and you may get some follow-up questions as on all kinds of things. Well, you will get follow-up questions on all kinds of things, but we're glad to be connected to Peter and have a line into his brain at this point, which is great.
Okay, I am happy to do this. I hope that it's useful.
Absolutely.
Well, are there any more questions? Otherwise, we can give ourselves back about 8 minutes of the day, knowing that you have Peter's email now and some interesting resources were shared in the chat. I have saved the chat, and I will also be sharing out the recording with you all so you can refer back to it later or share it with your colleagues. And so thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Awesome.
Thank you, Acacia.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
So, Holly, you'll be sending the chat in an email? Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you, Peter. Let's
Bye.
catch up. Bye.